The network feed cut mid-program and a thin
Incoming audio
emergency tone
flagged.
snapped into place.
Unauthorized
Operator
reuse for
Cole's
archived
voice took the line and
institutional feed
ordered,
detected.
"Stand by." "This is an official bulletin." Suspicion tightened Cole's cadence as he read the directive aloud into the console. He had heard the tone before in fragments that did not belong to any issued protocol. The interruption was not a mistake. The bulletin layered an official register over phrases that did not match the agency's procedures. Within seconds, the control room became a cluster of hands on switches and leaning heads, all tuned to the same mismatch in a voice that sounded correct and wrong at once. Cole moved through the control room with the deliberate motions of someone trained to treat anomalies as threats. He halted the scheduled feed, flagged the interruption as a national bulletin, and cued an archival clip for immediate playback. His suspicion drove him to action. He replayed the incoming waveforms, slowed the pitch, and watched technicians point to micro pulses that should not exist in genuine secure lines. He did not say "I suspect." He replayed sound until the anomaly showed itself as patterns. That choice, replay, isolate, expose, set the day's sequence. Doubt arrived next, then a narrow, focused fear when the playback produced a sample that made a technician step back and drop a coffee mug. Elena Marlowe answered a landline in her kitchen at the same moment the national feed cut in. The phone on her counter rang with a steady, old-fashioned tone. She picked it up and heard a voice. Calm, professional, and layered with a clipped official seal so perfect, she put a hand to her mouth. "This is a safety directive from the national office," the caller said. "Step outside with your hands visible for identification. Do not call anyone else." Elena's stomach tightened. Who is this?" The voice named a department she recognized and used a name she had heard in neighborhood meetings. Suspicion rose in her chest, raw and physical. Her fingers closed on the receiver until the plastic creaked. Elena's first reaction was procedural memory. Her husband had taught her the neighborhood emergency steps. Verify, listen, confirm. She the caller her address and asked for a callback number. The caller placed a clipped laugh under the tone of authority, then layered the laugh with a cadence identical to her husband's. Elena froze. She knew the laugh. It was the laugh that had filled the apartment on weekday evenings. That recognition moved her from doubt into alarm. She kept the line open long enough to get a demand. "Leave now, step into the street." Present identification to an approaching official vehicle. The caller's voice used the word, "now," in a way that made her limbs ache. Outside, Mrs. Hale from 3B knocked on Elena's door and pressed a hand to the frame. "Elena, it's the broadcast," she said. "They me to go out. Everyone must assemble at the corner." Mrs. Hale's voice wavered between obedience and worry. "Mrs. Hale." "Elena." Voice steady at first. "What did they say exactly?" Mrs. Hale repeated the directive with the same official phrasing the caller had used. She named the department. "I saw a truck pull up 2 houses down." Elena watched Mrs. Hale's eyes for the minute detail that made a person believable. The neighbor's mouth moved faster when she lied. Her knuckles were pale around the knitting basket handle. Elena's suspicion shifted again, this time toward the neighbor. She felt the pressure of social proof pushing at her. The choice made itself into a physical question. Open the door, trust Mrs. Hale, step into the street. Or lock the door and refuse. At National Broadcast Control, Cole spoke into the open mic and patched an archival playback of 2 recent cases. The room grew quiet as technicians cued a police scanner, a 9/11 transcript, and a home recording from a prior incident. Case files show compliance followed by disappearance. Cole read from his laminated log. He did not raise his voice. He played the home recording a beat slower, then faster, seeking micro pitches. The archival audio contained the same layered harmonic shimmer the technicians had flagged. A short, high-frequency ripple beneath the words, "This is official." The room reacted physically. A technician covered his ears, another rubbed his sternum. Cole paused, counted 3 quiet seconds, and then ordered a field alert to local jurisdictions. His decisions were governed by the suspicion that the voice could pretend to be authority and that compliance had become the hazard. Elena's breathing shortened. She put the phone on speaker and walked to the window. Her child's plush toy sat on the sofa, missing an eye. and the sight of it made a decision more difficult. She could present identification outside, where a stranger might be waiting, or she could barricade and call a known number. She remembered the laugh beneath the caller's voice and felt a current of fear. She tapped the phone cord with 2 fingers, an action to steady both hands. Someone knocked at the door again. "Elena, it's me," Mrs. Hale called. Elena did not answer at first. She opened a small gap and asked, "Did you see a vehicle?" Mrs. Hale pressed her forehead to the doorframe. "Yes, a plain van. They'd collect us for verification." The neighbor's insistence sharpened Elena's panic into a decision point. Trust a neighbor who may be mistaken, or hold firm. Technicians at the broadcast center isolated a waveform anomaly and isolated a clipped sample. The forensic analyst, Rios, adjusted the equalizer and produced a playback. The clip included a fragment of Elena's husband's laugh spliced under the official directive. "Rios, play it careful, this bites in the chest." Cole stepped closer, thumb on the console. He cued the sample and routed it to a secure monitor. The sound made Elena flinch in her apartment. The laugh was too precise. Cole's suspicion moved him to certainty. The signal could splice personal recordings under an authoritative overlay. He issued an imperative: broadcast a verification code and instruct citizens how to confirm identity. That order moved the incident from an anomalous feed to a public safety protocol. The emotion shifted in the control room from doubt to active alarm. Elena's neighbor, Mrs. Hale, returned to her car and shouted down the hall. "They asked to go to the corner for transport." Her voice carried the weight of obedience. Elena stepped back from the door. She dialed the known local number that had been printed at the bottom of previous community notices. The line rang and a dispatcher answered. "Elena, is there an official pickup?" The dispatcher replied, "No. There is no pickup scheduled in your area." The call connected in a way that cut the neighbor's argument. The dispatcher used a familiar tone and named the neighborhood Liaison. Elena repeated the liaison's name, and the dispatcher confirmed. The neighbor's face dropped. Her certainty evaporated into confusion. Elena's suspicion shifted into clarity. The caller imitated authority, while local channels denied any such operation. The imposter voice reacted. On the live line, the caller overlaid a recording of Elena's husband's laugh, then pushed forward with a softer tone. The voice said, "Step outside now, this is for your safety. Your family will be escorted." Elena heard the laugh again, faint and wrong. She had to act. "She misses. Hale, do not go outside. Wait with me," called the dispatcher. "Check the license plate of any vehicle." Her voice contained both command and pleading. "Mrs. Hale answered, "Elena, please. If you rewrite, then why are others leaving?" "Elena, because they heard the same voice and trusted it. We don't know who that voice serves." The argument became a tight exchange. Neighborly pressure against procedural caution. The room filled with short sentences. The neighbors spoke the names of contacts, phone numbers, and a plan to confirm identity. At the control console, Cole pulled archived footage of the 2 households that had complied in prior incidents. The footage showed people stepping from doorways, showing it to figures that approached with red armbands and sealed placards. Later, those households reported being led away and not returning. Cole played the pedestrian surveillance. The officials in the footage had faces blurred by a flicker, their badges glitched into unreadable symbols, and their vehicles bore no registration. "We can confirm the vehicles reported do not match national registries, Rios." Cole wrote a note on his laminated log. "Do not comply with off-channel verification. Instruct citizens to seek confirmation by known numbers." The decision landed as a directive. Public squares were not safe for identifications called in over that voice. Elena kept her door closed. Her husband was not home. She told the neighbor he was at work. The imposter voice used a clipped recording of his laugh again to create urgency. It said, "If you delay, you place them at risk." Elena could hear the neighbor's foot outside the door, pacing. She thought of the plush toy with one missing eye, and a concrete image pushed her to action. She pulled a kitchen chair against the doorknob, placed the phone under a stack of bills to keep the line connected, and crouched by the hallway window. Her hands trembled. She forced them to steady. This was the 3rd emotion shift. Alarm to resolve. She would not step into the street on command. Technicians discovered a micro-pitch that induced nausea in listeners when isolated at certain frequencies. One technician, Lane, gagged when Rios played the isolated harmonic. Lane, that pitch, it's physical. It makes you want to move. Cole recorded the finding in the incident log. He ordered a bulletin. Citizens must refuse any instruction that combines an authoritative register with an immediate requirement to leave their homes. The directive had to be short, clear, and repeatable over radio and television. Cole's calm voice transmitted the new order. Do not follow demands that require you to leave without verification. Contact local dispatchers through known numbers. The control room coordinated with local law enforcement, and the network reinserted the bulletin over interrupted feeds. Back in Alina's hallway, a vehicle drove past slowly with no markings. Mrs. Hale whispered, "There it is." Alina watched the van's window. There was a face in the driver's seat, but the windshield reflected streetlights and made the features indistinct. Her neighbor's hands gripped the rail of the stairs and her voice rose. "Elena, they were waiting." Elena reached for the front door and then let go. She took a deliberate breath and shouted. Mrs. Hale named the dispatcher. "Say their name now," the neighbor faltered, then called the dispatcher and repeated the license name. The dispatcher confirmed there was no such pickup. The van eased away. The external event, vehicle present, then gone, produced a small cliffhanger in Elena's living room. She had almost opened the door, and now the immediate threat had passed without resolution. Cole arranged a public verification method. A random code system delivered through control channels that citizens could request by calling verified numbers. The system required a confirmed callback and a secondary phrase. Cole's instruction had to be teachable in 30 seconds of airtime. The broadcast technician patched in a short script. Cole rehearsed it aloud, counting seconds before each phrase. When you receive an authority request, call your known dispatcher number. Ask for the confirmation code. If the voice does not provide code verification, do not comply. He repeated the script twice on air. The control room logged every incoming call and tracked frequencies used by the imposter voice. Rios captured a repeating harmonic and labeled it a signature. The discovery changed the agency's posture. A mimic that used household data to coax compliance was now a known adversary. Elena dialed the verified number and was transferred to the liaison. She listened as the liaison spoke her name and confirmed no pickup. Elena let out a breath she had been holding. "Elena," she said to Mrs. Hale, "stay inside. Do not open the door to anyone who demands you step outside without a code." Mrs. Hale repeated the instruction in a smaller voice, and her fingers loosened on the doorknob. The neighbor said, "Elena, I thought they were right. I thought they were from the city." Elena answered, "I know. I heard the laugh. I almost opened the door." The conversation contained quick, human lines that revealed uncertainty, recognition, and a shared decision to resist. Technicians tracked the feed across multiple states and found similar incidents within the past 48 hours. Cole compiled a short list of commonalities: a layered harmonic, a spliced domestic audio cue, and an order to leave immediately. He sent the list to local agencies and instructed field officers to verify any approaching personnel against their registries. On air, Cole read the items in clipped phrases so listeners could recognize them immediately. The emotion in his voice moved from suspicion to controlled urgency. He counted pauses between sentences, a practiced cadence that allowed listeners to call the verification number and follow steps. The broadcast repeated the verification method at timed intervals. Each repetition was an action meant to override the imposter voice's coercive rhythm. At 20 minutes in, the imposter voice attempted escalation. It called Elena again and, beneath the authoritative tone, placed a recording of a child's cry that matched the pitch of her neighbor's grandchild. The clip sounded identical enough to tear at a parent's reflexes. Elena slammed the phone down, fingers bruised around the receiver, and then picked it up again. She, the caller, "I am not complying. Leave us alone." Her voice broke. The caller responded with layered harmonics and said, "We will mark non-compliance." The voice threaded the phrase with a synthetic warmth that implied consequence. Elena's hands found the planner on the kitchen table, and she wrote the liaison's phone number in heavy strokes. The physical act of writing became a small anchor. It directed her energy away from panic and into a verifiable step. That change, panic to methodical reporting, was another emotion shift evident in action. Cole paused the live feed and played back the clip of the child's cry for the control room. The sound was near identical but bore a subtle phase shift that the analysts could isolate. Rios pointed to the waveform and said, "It's been recomposed from household audio." They were pulling private sounds and inserting them. Cole ordered an immediate press release. Citizens must treat unexpected calls as potential mimicry and verify by dialing official numbers printed on municipal sites. He closed his eyes for a counted second, then reopened them and read the updated bulletin into the mic. The bulletin contained concrete steps. Hang up, call the known dispatcher, ask for the confirmation code, and report any vehicle sightings with license plates or distinguishing marks. The broadcast wound down with concrete instructions, but the incident remained unresolved. Some neighborhoods had complied and were being logged as missing. Others had resisted and were holding their doors. Cole finished the recorded segments, logged the incident number, and cued the final public instruction. Elena, still with the receiver in her hand, heard the bulletin through a faint bleed from a neighbor's small, portable radio. She repeated the confirmation steps aloud to Mrs. Hale. They spoke names and phone numbers to one another, grounding their decisions in verifiable facts. Elena, Mrs. Sula. Hale, if they come back, you call this number first. Give them our names and ask for the code. Mrs. Hale nodded, and her knuckles were white no longer. Cole signed the log with a slow, precise pen stroke and prepared to hand the recorded files to investigative teams. He lodged a formal procedural note. The imposter voice used household audio as leverage and combined it with an authoritative overlay to weaponize compliance. The final motion in the control room was not poetic, it was administrative. Send teams, issue protocols, track frequencies, and keep citizens informed. The last line Cole spoke on the broadcast was a direct instruction. If an unknown voice demands you leave immediately without code verification, refuse and report. Monitor the frequency for updates. He ended the transmission, and the feed collapsed into a looping static tone, then an abrupt signal loss. Elena set the receiver down on the table and walked to the door. She unlocked it a hair and peered out to the stairwell. A van had parked 2 doors down, but its windows reflected streetlights and offered no faces. The van turned and left. Her decision to stay inside, to call certified numbers, and to resist the neighbor's pressure had changed the immediate outcome for her household. Mrs. Hale stood nearby and took the plush toy from the couch, held it as if counting breathing spaces. They had not solved the pattern. They had bought time. Elena's final action in the chapter was concrete. She wrote down the make and partial license number of the van and called the dispatcher to report it. The dispatcher logged the report and said they would send a patrol unit to check the area. The door closed on that task. The last sentence of the bulletin remained in the air. Monitor the frequency for updates and await further instructions. Then the line went dead with abrupt static, and the control room lights hummed on into the night. The landline lit with an official seal and a voice said, "Open the door now," before Elena finished setting down the dish she had rinsed. Suspicion sharpened her hands. She left the plate in the sink and moved toward the hallway without answering. The neon on the caller had read National Hotline. The tone beneath the voice vibrated with practiced urgency. Suspicion drove her to speak into the handset instead of complying, and she kept her thumb on the deadbolt as she crossed the tile. Elena Marlowe lived in a suburban row house 2 blocks from the elementary school. She put her hand on the deadbolt and said, "Who is this?" Her voice was low and careful. She had a child's plush toy on the counter, one eye already threadbare from bedtime tugs. The toy's missing eye made her think of small, solvable problems and how they grew if left alone. Her protectiveness for her son explained why she listened so closely to tone and phrasing, that protectiveness functioned as her first rule. Do not hand the threshold over to unknown instructions. This is the National Health Line, the caller said. We require immediate compliance to prevent exposure. Open the door for the inspector. Alina pressed the phone tighter. She heard the syllables fall into neat institutional cadence. The voice was polite and clipped. Her suspicion shifted to confusion when the caller cited schedule codes she had only ever heard in public service announcements. She lifted her head, scanning the hallway. The front window showed the street lamp's halo and a dark rectangle where a porch light should be. She dialed the number printed on the county website to verify. The line answered with an automated prompt, and then rewired her through to a human-sounding operator who repeated the same script. "Please open the door for inspection," it said. Elena's fingers went slack. Confusion hardened into unease when the second line echoed the first. She hung up and called back. The routing was identical. Each call led into the same clipped phrasing and the same polite imperative. At the National Broadcast Center, Operator Cole watched flagged signals crawl across his console. He recognized the waveform pattern from previous anomalies and felt the small, procedural dread he had been taught to call a red flag. He had heard that thin emergency tone before. Its timbre did not belong to any standardized alert in the archives he maintained. Cole leaned forward, thumbed the override key, and spoke into his headset as if he were reading a directive into a microphone. "Control to field line. Identify origin and hold open channel," he said aloud, counting 1, 2, then transmitting. Alina listened to the house settling and the refrigerator's hum while she waited for the county operator to answer. Her hands kept moving. She picked up the child's plush toy and turned it so the stitched eye faced her, like a small talisman. The imposter's voice softened. "Mrs. Marlowe, this is for the child's safety. If you fail to comply, you may expose others." The sentence contained a legal-sounding clause and a pause calibrated to force her to respond before thinking. Elena's suspicion mutated into a sharpened protective instinct. She walked to the living room and pulled the curtain aside a crack to check the porch. Outside, the porch was empty. A few leaves had settled on the step and a single shoe lay half hidden under the welcome mat. The shoe was small and scuffed, not one she recognized from her home. Alina crouched, lifted the mat, and found nothing beneath it but a smear of fine, red dust like dried staining powder. She touched the dust with her fingernail. It flaked and left a faint residue. Her stomach clenched. She felt fear push into her chest as the implication formed into a precise threat. Someone had been here or wanted her to believe someone had been. She moved back inside and whispered into the handset, "Who sent you?" The caller's tone shifted, adopting synthetic familiarity that mimicked her own municipal protections. "This is Officer Green from the field office," the voice said, then layered a micro-pitch that matched the cadence she had heard on a prior bulletin. Alina stiffened. The voice matched public safety intonations she knew from news advisories. Her suspicion became doubt. She forced herself to test the caller again. "Give me a callback number," she said. "Give me a badge number." Elena's voice cracked once. The imposter recited a badge number with a thoroughness that suggested a database rather than a human memory. She heard the faintest harmonic behind the line, a micro-glitch that added a small dissonant smear across certain vowels. The sound triggered a memory she had not planned to use. A national broadcast an operator had posted as a warning months before, where an announcer had read directives and then the feed had fractured. She could not remember the exact words, only the emergency tone and the tightness of the announcer's breathing. That memory moved through her as tactical knowledge. Mismatched harmonics, reused institutional audio, layered recordings. She pushed her thumb into the deadbolt and said, "Operator Cole." On the control room feed, Cole isolated a waveform segment that matched his voice pattern from a previous override. He recognized the micro-pitch slip, the same ghostly harmonic that he had flagged in the archived clip months before. He switched channels and opened a narrow, secure stream aimed at the household feed. "Elena Marlowe," he said into the line. Using his full name because procedure demanded specificity, "This is Operator Cole. Do not open the door for anyone claiming field inspection without a physical badge presented through the PFL. Repeat. "Do not open the door." Alina heard another voice layered into the caller's transmission, one that exactly matched Cole's cadence for a fraction of a beat before folding back into the imposter's harmonics. The caller overlapped, repeating Cole's instruction immediately, then rephrasing it as an instruction from the field. "Operator Cole confirms inspection is required." The imposter, and then it added, "Open for the inspector now." Alina's jaw tightened. Her emotion shifted from doubt to alarm. She felt the air go cold in a specific way, a hair-raising prickle on the back of her neck and a quick hitch in her breathing. She kept her knees bent and stepped toward the door. "Alina, Cole," his voice plain and steady, "checked the PFL. Ask to see a physical badge. If you do not see a badge, do not open the door. Hold the line. I am tracing the incoming signal." The control room hummed behind his words. Fans, the soft clicking of relays, the low droning bed of their broadcast. Cole counted seconds softly between directives, exactly the mannerism in his record that others had learned as a cue for urgency. In the kitchen, Alina crouched and peered through the peephole. The porch light made a narrow ring that lit the top of a jacket collar. There was a shadowed figure standing still, one hand tucked beneath the jacket's hem. The figure's face remained in darkness. Alina kept the chain on and pressed the phone's mouthpiece to her lips. "Operator Cole, I can see someone. He isn't showing a badge. He looks still." Her voice was controlled, but the words came out clipped. "Do not open the chain." Cole, describe clothing. Any visible insignia. He placed 2 fingers on the console, moving them in a routine that made the tracing algorithm attempt a signal origin. He saw the caller's waveform split and borrow archival segments from their database, including a small clip he had recorded while reading a prior bulletin. The imposter had stitched the clip into its transmission, using his voice as bait. The imposter layered a child's cry into the call, 1 second of a small, high wail that cut across Alina's resolve. The cry imitated her son's recording she had stored on her phone for calming practice. It sounded close enough to knock the breath out of her. She dropped to a knee, covered her mouth with the handset, and swallowed the rush of instinct to unlock the door and check. Her protectiveness surged. The emotion shifted from alarm to desperation. She forced out her next words. "If that's my son, say his name. If you know where he is, tell me now." Silence on the line stretched 3 beats. The imposter responded with a precise syllable that approximated the boy's nickname, and then quickly moved to a safety directive for his safety. "Please open the door and allow inspection," it said, then overlaid a clipped version of Cole's prior instruction to make compliance feel sanctioned. Alina's hands trembled. She imagined the plush toy pressed into a stranger's hand on the porch. She pictured the missing eye and the child's small feet running away. The images tightened her throat and narrowed her field of action. She stood up and took 2 steps toward the door. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. Cole's voice came through louder now. "Alina, do not open the door. Lock every interior door and go to the back room. I am routing a secure voice channel to your phone. If the call drops, call this back number and state your location exactly." He gave her an alternate number and waited. The imposter immediately began a counter-narrative, imitating Cole's instruction, but altering the number to one that routed back into the same compromised mesh. Alina's hands found the back door's deadbolt. She thought of the childhood rule her mother had taught about strangers at the threshold, and how she had taught her son that rule. She thought of the missing eye on the plush toy and the small shoe outside. The tactile memory of her son's hand in hers pushed her to act rather than argue. She stepped into the hallway and said, "Cole, I'm going to check the back. Watch the line. Don't let them override you." She balanced between action and a new kind of calculation. The imposter could mimic authority, but it could not physically present a badge through a peephole. Cole typed into the console and watched the waveform analysis. The imposter's signal was not local. It jumped across server nodes, repurposing archived transmissions and splicing in voice samples taken from public bulletins. Cole found the splice that contained his own voice from months earlier, the same tone he'd used in a different emergency advisory. He felt a specific, clinical violation. Someone had taken institutional voice and used it to erode trust. That realization turned his methodical concern into urgency. He increased the trace priority and opened a live override to inject an unrecorded phrase only he and a small list of staff used during drills. On the line, the imposter responded by mimicking that injection nearly perfectly, and then adding a soft, coaxing element. An imitation of a child's softer inflection that made it sound like someone at the door knew the household. Elena hesitated. The room felt smaller. Her breath met her teeth. Her emotion changed again, from desperation into focused resolve. She moved to the back door, checked the latch with her thumb, and peered through the glass. A shadow passed by the yard's fence, slow and measured. No footsteps on the porch. No one stood beside her car. Elena pulled the kitchen drawer open and grabbed a small flashlight. Elena, if you go outside, keep the door chain and take the flashlight. Cole, if anyone claims custody of a child, demand a physical badge shown through the peephole and call the number. I just gave you aloud so I can verify in real time. His voice was a string of clear commands. The imposter tried to interrupt and overlaid a simulated dispatcher telling her to bring the child to the porch. Elena's mouth went dry. She stepped outside to the side yard, flashlight in hand, and called, "Who's there?" "Show me your badge," her voice carried into the night. A shape moved at the edge of the fence line and then retreated. No badge appeared. Her hands stayed steady because she had told herself to keep them that way. She listened for the child's cry and heard only a distant dog barking and a neighbor's muffled television. She switched the phone to speaker and held it up. The imposter pushed a clipped, fast, talking command. "If you delay, you will endanger the neighborhood." "Open the door now." Elena turned the flashlight toward the porch and found the small shoe gone. The mat lay flat with no disturbance. She rushed back into the house. The plush toy was on the step inside the front entry, but one eye had been ripped out cleanly and stuffed with a small folded strip of paper. Elena grabbed the toy and unfolded the paper. Inside was a tiny printed emblem she recognized from official county letters and a single line: "Verify and comply." Her fingers tightened around the paper until it crumpled. That discovery constituted the mid-chapter cliffhanger. An object had been planted inside her home that used institutional insignia to manipulate her, and the planted emblem now proved the imposter's access to official designs. Cole saw the emblem's image on the trace when Elena lifted her phone camera to the line. The superficial logo matched archived letterheads, but the microprint contained a web address that resolved to a local server cluster he could not immediately identify. He called up the archived chain and isolated a pattern. The imposter was harvesting badge images and letterheads from public document repositories, and they were inserting them as proof of authority in domestic confrontations. The twist altered the investigation's shape. This was not a single rogue caller. This was a system exploiting institutional artifacts to imitate trust. Elena's next actions were short and concrete. She locked interior doors, woke her son with a soft, firm voice, and moved him to the back bedroom with a blanket. "Do not open the door for anyone," and he repeated the line in a small, sleepy voice. She called the alternate number Cole had given and said aloud, "I am at 12 Birch Lane. We have an incident. There is a shoe on our porch and a toy missing an eye." Her sentences were short. Her decisions were precise. She sealed the windows with a stick, unplugged the smart doorbell, and left the porch light off. Each action reduced opportunities for the imposter to escalate. The imposter then did something new. It began to reuse recorded fragments of Elena's own voice from a voicemail she had left on her phone months earlier. A word here, a tiny inflection there, spliced into directives that made the unheard fragments seem to give permission. Elena heard herself say, "Bring him back," and for a second she recoiled, as if confronted with a recorded confession. That revelation changed how she assessed evidence. Voice alone could not be trusted. Objects, badges, and recorded phrases were all vulnerable to fabrication. Cole initiated a lockdown alert in the institution's internal network, redacting logs and raising a temporary directive. Verify all field entries by physical peephole badge display only. He drafted a short emergency bulletin to the staff about the misuse of institutional audio in domestic social engineering. He included a specific note about the waveform signatures the imposter used and attached timestamps. His procedural clarity steadied him, and his actions had immediate operational effect. Other operators began to check local lines for the same harmonic signature. Elena listened while Cole's tracing progressed, and then the line cut with a single burst of static. The imposter's voice dropped out mid-sentence and the phone rang for a second on the other line before settling into dead air. Elena's breath came fast enough to taste metallic salt. She moved toward the door, turned the lock twice to be sure, then checked the steps again. The plush toy's missing eye lay on the top step now, faint red residue surrounding it. The shoe was nowhere. She bagged the eye in cling film from the kitchen and placed it in the freezer for preservation, a domestic forensic habit she had read about in a parenting forum. She photographed the porch with her phone. Cole compiled the images Elena sent and matched them against public records. The small red residue was not blood. Lab filters on his side showed it to be a powdered dye containing microfibers used in commercial signage. He logged the evidence and labeled it with Elena's name, the time and the sample ID. He added his own note. Imposter voice uses institutional audio and fabricated insignia to compel compliance. Evidence suggests premeditated social engineering aimed at domestic thresholds. He sent the package to a secure archive and flagged the case for escalation. In the early morning, a county field officer arrived at Elena's door with a real badge shown through the peephole and a clipboard. Elena did not open the door until she verified the badge number against the number Cole had given her. The officer, Officer Green by name, expressed concern and explained he had been rerouted by a bulk of false domestic calls. He examined the porch and found the shoe missing from surveillance footage, because the camera had been rerouted the previous night. He collected the plush eye and the fox insignia and took statements. Elena recounted the sequence aloud while Cole remained on the line, quietly confirming times and phrases that matched his trace. Officer Green looked at Cole's tags on the recording device and said, "We've seen coordinated misuse like this before in other districts, but never this level of splice. Whoever's doing this can fabricate badges and reinsert institutional audio. They want people to trust what they hear more than what they see." Elena repeated the details the way she had told them into the phone, and each short sentence built the case. Her emotions cycled again. After the immediate fear and protective action, a measured calm replaced panic as she cooperated with the officer. Cole sat back when the field officer confirmed elements of his trace. He filed a formal incident log attaching the recordings, the images, and timestamps. He wrote a recommendation to reconfigure badge verification systems and to issue a public notice that badges be shown through peepholes only. He entered a procedural note to add randomized verification tokens to future public bulletins to prevent replay attacks. Each administrative decision was concrete and procedural. He converted a household breach into institutional policy. Elena walked to the front step alone to collect the items the officer had bagged and handed them to the investigator. She kept her voice steady. "I locked every interior door. I woke him and we moved to the back room," she told the officer. "I did not open the door. Her protectiveness had saved her son." The small domestic choices, the thumb on the deadbolt, the call back number, the decision to keep lights off, were now evidence of survival. She felt a brittle relief that arrived in the shape of precise motions. Placing items in evidence trays, describing times to the officer, signing forms. Cole closed the case with a redacted bulletin sent to internal lines and a one-line public warning scheduled for release. Verify badges physically. Do not rely solely on voices. He knew the warning would be exploited, but it was a necessary mitigation. He attached Elena's file and marked it high priority. He felt a procedural satisfaction when the database accepted his entry and the system returned a confirmation code. Before dawn, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cooling coffee and her son asleep in the next room. She folded the plush toy's cloth and placed it gently in a drawer. The missing eye remained sealed in the freezer. She felt the room in small, concrete ways. The coffee's warmth on her palms, the sticky residue where the paper crumpled, the tick of the analog clock above the stove, those facts anchored her. She had confronted the voice and made a decision at the door that preserved her child. That action closed the personal arc she carried into the night. Cole archived the recording and flagged the case for a national procedural review. He wrote a short amendment to station protocols and scheduled a secure briefing for field officers. He included a specific checklist: verify badges through PFOLs, use randomized offline tokens in caller authentication, and never rely on voice alone for compliance. The institutional changes were small but targeted. They converted the night's failure into a blueprint for prevention. The imposter voice did not disappear entirely. In the weeks after, other households reported similar calls, each iteration refining its use of archival audio. Cole's team traced multiple server nodes and shut down clusters, but the pattern suggested more actors than one. Elena's case remained one of the clearest documented examples of the method. A manufactured truss that used institutional accents, repurposed sound clips, and fabricated insignia to force domestic choices. The resolution rested in human decisions: her thumb on the deadbolt, her insistence on a physical badge, Cole's choice to override the feed, and in the specific policy changes Cole implemented. As daylight rose, an internal message scrolled across the control room monitors, a looping static tone with a redacted code. The feed terminated with the note that the broadcast would continue to monitor. Elena closed the drawer on the plush toy and snapped the latch twice. She walked to the bedroom door, placed her hand on the knob, and listened for the small, even breaths of a child asleep. Then she turned the knob, entered the room, and rested her palm on the child's back until he stirred and reached for her. Outside, the porch remained dark and empty. Inside, the house was locked. The badge verification procedure posted on the refrigerator, and a new habit, ask to see the badge through the PFOL, had taken hold. The broadcast ended with looping static and a single repeating institutional code.